In those days, the Philistines gathered to make war against Israel. They drew up their forces, and the battle lines were deployed. 1 Samuel 4:1.
In biblical times, the warrior-like Philistines are an implacable enemy. Their champion, Goliath, wreaks terror upon the people of Israel, and even mighty Samson falls victim to their brutality. They capture the sacred Ark of the Covenant, kill Israel's first prince, and sever the nation in two.
In the course of more than 1,000 years living in the land of Israel, no people ever terrified the Israelites more than the people they called Philistines.
Where did the Philistines come from? Some believe a deadly volcano that destroyed a Greek island may have forced them to settle in Israel. As messengers of death and destruction, were the Philistines merely fulfilling some mystical role as God's disciplinarians of Israel? What was the secret of their overwhelming military strength? And why did they vanish so suddenly from the pages of history? These are but a few of the mysteries of the Bible. In story after story in the Bible, echoing the clash of battle across the books of Joshua, Judges, and Samuel, for more than 2 centuries, the Philistines are the embittered archenemy of the people of Israel. Though long gone, their warrior legacy still haunts the Holy Land. Israel's original name, Palestine, means land of the Philistines, a term first applied to the entire region by the Greek historian Herodotus when he visited here in the 5th century BCE. Living along the southern coastal plain, their civilization was anchored by 5 key cities: Ashkelon, Ekron, Gaza, Ashdod, and Gath. Having settled the area long before the exodus from Egypt, the Philistines may have blocked the way of the Jews to the Promised Land.
When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistines' country, though that was shorter. God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. Exodus 13:17.
The Bible tells us that rather than confront the Philistines, the Israelites undertake a lengthy detour through the wilderness, where they will wander for 4 decades. After the Israelites settle their new land, the Philistines begin to play an influential role in the fate of the region. God mysteriously uses them as instruments to punish the Israelites for repeated disobedience of his sacred covenant with them.
The Israelites continued doing what was evil in God's sight, and God subjected them to Philistine power. Judges 13:1.
Parts of biblical prophecy saw these enemies as tools of God, the rod of God with which God chastises the people for their sins. Now, this became a theme, and an important theme, in later prophecy.
The Philistines will be the bane of Israelite existence. They will go on to influence the lives of the Jews' first two great kings. But who were these seemingly aggressive foes? What kind of people would evolve into such a dreaded enemy? Until modern times, almost everything known about them came solely from the Bible, as recorded by the early Israelites. These are the ruins of Ekron, a principal Philistine city about 20 miles south of Jerusalem. Here, science and archaeology have changed our perception of this once feared people.
It's the only place till now where we have this overall picture of a city plan, of the fortification, of the industrial belt, well planned. And it seems that in antiquity, these people were very conscious of ecology, something that is so modern now. For us, it's very strange. We go back, and these people were definitely very aware not to have industry in the heart of the city.
Today, the very word Philistine is a derogatory term describing someone lacking sensitivity and devoid of culture. In contrast, treasures found at Ekron and at other sites present contradictory new insight into these ancient foes.
The fact is that among the most beautiful things I have ever seen on display in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem are precisely Philistine objects. Pottery, sculpture, goddesses, gods, jewelry, craftwork, handiwork, which reached a level of aesthetic accomplishment which in my judgment is unequaled in the ancient land of Israel.
At about the same time the Philistines are developing their culture in Palestine, cave dwellers in Nevada first use primitive decoys for hunting ducks. Oracle bones in China are engraved with questions to aid the king in foretelling the future. And in Mexico, ceramic figurines are buried with the dead to indicate their social status. In other parts of the world, a new metal is first smelted and beaten into use. Its name, iron. Was this the key to the military power of the Philistines?
There was no blacksmith to be found in all the land of Israel, for the Philistines had said to themselves, the Hebrews might make swords or spears. 1 Samuel 13:19.
So the conventional wisdom is that the secret of Philistine technological superiority is that they were using iron while everybody else was using bronze, which is copper and tin. If that were true, it's completely obvious. An iron sword will cut a bronze shield. The only trouble is that the archaeology doesn't support it.
Iron does appear in small quantities in the 12th century. It appears first as jewelry. It was precious.
Archaeologists continue to look for evidence that the Philistines might have had iron in sufficient quantity to equip an entire army. It is an unresolved question, but only one of a catalog of mysteries about these long-vanished people. In our pursuit of the mighty Philistines, we confront an undisputed fact. Whoever these mysterious people may have been, their culture was not native to the land that bears their name. In fact, they were foreigners, come from afar.
They weren't Semitic. Every time the Bible said Philistine, it said uncircumcised. Uncircumcised was a fact. It didn't mean they didn't like you. What it meant that the Philistines were not Semites. All Semite people were circumcised.
Where did the Philistines come from? While their great temples and palaces have disappeared, small fragments of pottery have survived. These are silent messages from the distant past, and they tell a revealing story.
When we first found this pottery, which is very delicate, very beautiful, decorated in a style that we know from Mycenae, we know from Crete, we know from Cyprus, when looking into it, we thought it was imported.
But tests showed that the shards had not come from foreign soil. The pottery had been locally made at Ekron itself. Ironically, it wasn't the pottery that was alien, but rather the people who made it. And they had brought their culture with them from the faraway Greek islands in the Aegean Sea. What made the Philistines leave their native land and set out on a perilous search for a new home?
Huge volcano, the one that blew up the island of Santorini, the one which may have given rise to the lost kingdom of Atlantis, since a whole civilization was blown apart by that volcano. That volcano was the beginning of disruption in the life of the island, which was aggravated by invading forces coming into the mainland of Greece from the north, from what's now Bulgaria.
Displaced by natural disaster and by invasion, the Philistines fight their way south and east on a war-torn migration that lasted generations. Then, early in the 12th century BCE, they arrive at the shores of distant Egypt. This is the majestic temple of Medinet Habu in Thebes, capital of ancient Egypt. Its decorated walls bear witness to a local victory over invading foreign forces.
Those who entered the river mouths were like birds ensnared in the net. Those who came on land were overthrown and killed. Inscription at Thebes, Egypt.
The invasion that is stemmed comes from the Philistines, now thrown back by the Egyptians to what will become known as Palestine. But people known as Canaanites already live there. A dramatic discovery